Chapter 17. As the girls played in the yard, Okey stood nearby, listening to Matsu and Henry discuss the weather. That was all anyone talked about lately. The drought had affected everything. The silkworms were dead, and the plants were dying too. Herr Schnell was preparing to go back to Japan for more plants and more money. They needed both if the farm was to survive. She did not question where the money would come from. She trusted Herr Schnell still had sources. In spite of the troubles, Okey enjoyed watching Matsu and Henry. Matsu always stood straight and his movements were smooth and sure. Henry moved every which way. Now he had one foot on the fence rail and was sucking on a piece of straw. Ugh! He laughed a lot and was always friendly. Sometimes he laughed so hard he would take his hat off and slap it across his legs. He and Matsu laughed at each other, too. Okey did not always know what was so funny. No matter. She just enjoyed being near them. Suddenly a pleasant thought came into her head. Matsu-san and Henry are my best friends. And she looked at them again and smiled, then bowed her head so they would not think that she was making fun of them. In Japan, she would never have had two young men as her best friends. Okey turned toward Francis and Mary. It was time for their naps, even though Francis, almost 5 years old, did not think that she needed one anymore. Okey picked up the empty laundry basket and walked toward the girls. She had only taken a few steps when her eyes stopped focusing and her mind went numb. Her limbs were suddenly very heavy. The basket slipped from her hands as she fainted. "Okey," called Frances as she ran to her nanny. "Okey," and she leaned down and patted Okey's face with her tiny hands. "Wake up, Okey, wake up!" Hearing Frances call out, Matsu and Henry turned and rushed to Okey. Matsu kneeled down, lifted her eyelids, and then felt her forehead. "Henry," he said as he picked her up and hurried toward the house, "please bring the girls. Schnell Oku-san is inside, and I think Okey has a fever." He carried Okey into the house and placed her on her bed. Mrs. Schnell's face went pale as soon as she saw Okey. "Please get the doctor, Matsu," she said quietly, and she sat beside Okey, gently wiping her face and arms with a damp cloth. Okey was breathing, but she was not moving at all. Henry and the girls waited close by until Matsu returned with Dr. Takano. Okey's body raged with a fever. She could not talk, but she could hear people talking. She felt more tired than sick, not nauseous like the men were when they first came to the farm. Her arms and legs felt so heavy she could not move them. She knew Mrs. Schnell was caring for her. She felt the gentle hands on her body, and she smelled the herbs. Matsu did Okey's chores, and he even watched the girls when they played outside. Okey could hear the children's voices, but it seemed as though they were far away. One day, the sounds were especially clear. "Sing to us, Matsu-san," begged Frances. "Okey sings to us." "Hi," he said gruffly. "I cannot sing like a bird." "Dance for us, Matsu-san," said Frances. "Okey dances for us." "Hi," he said. "I do not dance." Dr. Takano made herb dressings from lavender and eucalyptus, trying to bring Okey's temperature down. Mrs. Schnell brewed healing teas from the farm's own plants and gently forced her to drink them. Mrs. Veerkamp came many times to help in the sick room, and sometimes she brought chicken soup for all of them. She would sit by the bed, hold Okey in her arms, and slowly feed her a spoonful at a time. She would sing to her. Okey sensed the singing, and when Mrs. Veerkamp was holding her, she felt like a child again, in her own bed and in her mother's arms. She cuddled up to Mrs. Veerkamp, believing she was her mother. She was soothed. She smiled weakly. Okey was terribly sick for many days. Finally, her temperature started to come down. One day, Okey thought she was in her father's garden. She heard the birds singing and smelled the flowers. She felt happy because she saw her parents standing in the garden, talking and laughing. But why were they speaking English? She knew they could not speak English. And then she woke up and realized that she was not home. She was still in America, and there was no mother, and there was no father. A single tear slid down her cheek. She was more tired than she could possibly imagine, and she felt so alone. As she lay there, she became aware of a pleasant fragrance. In her bedroom, there were many flowers. She saw a bouquet of wildflowers and knew Frances and Mary had picked those. She heard a bird singing a cheerful song outside her window, and she knew who that was. Okay smiled wanly as she looked around her room. "I have many friends here," she whispered, and sad thoughts of home and family were softened by these simple gifts. Slowly, she continued to improve until finally she was able to go outside for longer and longer periods of time to see the beautiful hills that reminded her of Japan.